Welcome back, Nation, to another weekly episode. Today, I'm joined by Greg Portelance, Senior Director of HR at CIBC, for a conversation all about career growth, leadership, and what students can do right now to set themselves apart. We talk about Greg's path in HR, the challenges and career pivots that shaped his journey, how networking and tailoring your resume can make a difference, and what a company like CIBC does to help students grow once they've gotten the door. If you're trying to break into the corporate world and figure out how to separate yourself, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Thank you, Greg, for being here today.
Thanks, Sam. Happy to be here.
So, Greg, I'd really love to learn a bit more about your career path. What led you to where you are today?
So I can give you the whole long story where I started and where I am. And maybe it's best to probably start where most of your, I guess, listeners or viewers are is back in school, right? So
Totally.
I went to Brock University, so in St. Catharines. That's where I went to school. And, each and every summer. So my dad, he used to own a flooring store in the little town that we lived in. And I had worked for him since I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
Wow.
And so when I went to university, I worked for him in the summers, it was good. Like he owned like a retail store, so I helped with installations. I did some sales in the front of the store and things like that when customers would come in, and so I deal with that. So got a lot of experience there. There was one summer that I just wanted to change. I wanted to do something different. So I had a friend who. His father got a contract at a janitorial service for a school. So in the summer, we cleaned up the school, took all the gum off of the, under the desks and, polished all the floors and, did all that stuff over the summer. So I took the summer to do that. And we also did this other job, which was kind of fun, but also probably the worst job that I've ever done in my career, which was painting garbage cans. So we had this, so if and when I say painting garbage cans, it was the big garbage cans in behind the store. So those retail stores in the back where the big dumpsters, the trucks that have the forks on them and they lift the garbage cans to throw it in the back.
That's not a 5-minute job.
No. So we got this job. What was fun about it is we were free. I mean, we jumped in our own car and we drove, like they gave us a list of where to go, and we would just drive to the back of the store and, we would just paint the garbage can, put a sticker on it. It was done. We got paid and we'd move on to the next one. So we had a lot of freedom, right? It was great. We had a lot of freedom. We talked, me and my buddy, it was the two of us all the time. You weren't lonely. And so we had a lot of fun. But the worst part of the job is you could imagine painting a garbage can behind a restaurant. Because, just even your own garbage, if you leave it in the sun, because we're in the summer, right? Not in the winter. So in the summer, those garbage cans just stunk like you wouldn't believe. So, we'd have stuff over our mouth and we'd be like we'd be painting with one hand over our nose. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But just,
and I'm sure that smell has not left you.
Oh God, yeah, it was pretty bad, some of them. So that was the worst part of the job, but the freedom of just driving around and doing our own thing, and we could do it at any hours that we wanted to. We could start early, we could start late. It just didn't matter. The garbage cans were always there. So
and I mean, so you had to have been early 20s at this time, right?
I would have been probably 19, 20.
1920. Did you see yourself at that time in your current role? I mean, you're now a leader at CIBC and you were painting garbages, you were painting dumpsters. That's a big change.
Yeah, you know what? It's all a mentality. I never thought I'd be doing actually what I'm doing today, but my goal, so when I went to school, I took economics, and I never thought that I would be an economist necessarily, because to be an economist, it wasn't just taking an economics degree. You need a master's, you need mathematics, like there's a whole bunch of other things you need to do to become like a true economist. So, but it just helped me from a finance perspective, like economics degree, there's lots of accounting, lots of finance, lots of math, which helps in business today. So I always thought that I would just join a company, typically a big corporation, and I'd work my way up. That was my goal, to kind of start that. Came from a small town, didn't really have corporate experience, and it's hard to get into corporations when you don't have that experience. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about that, because in my current role, I see how people get that and kind of how they've grown. And it's maybe some advice I can give to some of your listeners around that. Being in HR, I get to see get to see how the hiring happens, and what people
Yeah.
look for and how people get in, and and it's hard, right? And
Yeah.
when I was young, which you are today, and probably all your listeners are the same thing, is I just had to find a job to make money to go back to school, right? Like I needed, so I would take whatever I could. Like, I didn't have many choices. I always had my dad's store, which I could rely on, but I wanted some other experiences, and it's good to get other experiences, and everyone should have that opportunity. But some people take that too literally, and they jump too
Yeah.
much, and they don't get a core understanding of what they've done, or to show that they've committed to something for a certain period of time before jumping to the next, to actually learn from it. Like, it takes a
Yeah.
good year, especially when you're talking about now working after school. It takes a good year to just become good in your job. So to get the value out of it, you should be staying for a couple of years in your role before you kind of move around, right? So
But that
but
could
I
be
did.
so difficult. I mean, sorry to interrupt you for a
Yeah, no,
second.
that's good.
We have students right now. I mean, I'm a finance student. Last summer, I was working landscape. In my mind, I'm thinking this doesn't seem like it's benefiting me for my future career, right? I'm not
Yeah.
gaining office experience or corporate experience. Instead, I'm out trimming bushes, which, don't get me wrong, there's fun in that as well, right? Just like
Yeah.
painting dumpsters. But how can you change that mindset from, hey, any work is good work, instead of being like, oh, I'm wasting my time here?
It's I mean, I don't believe that any experience is wasting your time, no matter what you do. But the choices that you might make it harder to get to the end result, depending on what your end result is, right? Like
Yeah,
what your
that's
goal
fair.
is. I mean, there's lots of people that take a course and don't actually do that. Like you say, finance. In 20 years from now, you might not be in finance. You might have a great job, but you might be doing, I don't know, consulting work in technology, and no financial
Right.
backgrounds needed for your role. Like, I'm not saying that's what you'll do, but there's lots of people that take stuff in school, but the career path, depending on what you take and where you start. And some people just have to work within what they've been given, right? Not
Hmm.
everyone has an opportunity to be able to just start from scratch and go where they want to go. Some people do, don't get me wrong, but you know, I never in a million years thought I would be in HR, but I just fell into it, and there's components of the role that I love, right? And
Yeah.
so I just continue to grow. But if I wanted to make a change in my career at some point, I either had to take a step back or a lateral step, right? And the problem is a lot of people, if you have freedom to be able to do that, then you should do that if that's something you want to do. But at the time that I probably needed to make a change, I was married, I had my first child, I had a mortgage, I had a house. And so I was just gaining some experience, and I'm kind of like, well, I am where I am. I kind of like what I'm doing. It might not have been exactly what I thought I would be, and so I just kept putting my effort into that so I could
Yeah.
grow, because there's different motivations that everyone have. Like, you can't, I don't want to say you can't love your job. There's lots of people that probably love what they do, and there's lots of people that, I don't want to say hate what they do, but they do it to a means to do other things, right?
Yeah.
You might not be able to get everything you want out of your job, but you have to figure out what motivates you. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is that, I started my career in retail, right? So, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we get to some of it. But retail hours are just harder, right? I mean, you could be morning shift, you could be an evening shift. You're always working on the weekends or at night on the weekends, or whatever that might be. So I wanted a job where I was more Monday to Friday, so I could
Yep.
be available on the weekends. That's the time that you spend time with friends. So I saw it as a job to pay for my bills and do the things that I wanted to do, right? And then you start to love aspects of your job, and then you like what you do. But there are different motivators for everyone. It's exactly, people are driven to do certain things, and you need to find what your motivation is and go and a job may be a means to get to your result, but the job may not be the goal for you, right?
Yeah.
And it's a little different for everyone. Like, I had a friend at the same time. So I took a job at this company called Future Shop, which is the old Best Buy. It used to be before Best Buy bought them all out. And it
Okay.
was a very aggressive retail kind of store around sales, because I either made $18,000 or I made my commissions. And I couldn't live on $18,000. And even though this was back in the 90s, I know today people would be like, that's crazy. How would you ever live off of that? But,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you had to make your commission. So it was much more aggressive. You had to be aggressive, to try and
Yeah.
get those sales. But I had a friend Reason why I was just bringing the story is I had a friend who graduated from university a year after me, and he wanted to be a pharmaceutical sales rep, and that was his goal. And he wouldn't accept anything else other than the like being a pharmaceutical salesperson. And
Right.
I kept saying to him, I said, listen, you got to get a job at least get some experience. And, like it doesn't even have to be in there. Like just show people that you got a job so you can move. He's like, no, I want that. I want that. And he stuck to his guns. Now it took him probably 6 to 9 months, but he stuck to his guns and he actually got the job in there.
Wow.
So, but again, he didn't work for 6 to 9 months. And again, he worked his network and he's a true salesperson. And, and people probably know what I mean by sales is some people just have a natural talent for it,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And he had that kind of natural talent. He's a little bit different than some of the other people would be in sales, but he has a natural talent for networking and building off of things and kind of doing that. And it was funny because I worked for Future Shop. The Future Shop taught me how to do true sales. Like when I worked for my dad, I knew product knowledge, which I would educate customers on, but I didn't know how to close a sale. Future Shop
Right.
taught me how to actually close a sale. Like when you want to do sales, you never ask a question, well, do you want it or not? You always ask the question to say, which color do you want it in? So they have to select a color,
Yeah.
or
Do you want
what
to buy
time do you
next week or the week after? You
exactly
know?
when do you want it
Yeah.
delivered? Do you want the Samsung or do you want the Sony?
Yeah.
Like whatever it might be. So they don't. So that's what Future Shop taught me and taught me how to get to that point around doing it. So I taught him all the knowledge and skills that I had based on that, and he utilized that for his interviews. And over time, he actually got it. So you know. If you're really motivated to do that and you can hold on, then do that. I don't think there's any concern. I mean, every path is different, right? For
Yeah.
every person. I'm just different because I thought as soon as I graduated, I needed a job, I needed to make money, so I took whatever that I could. I ended up getting into a corporation. I ended up being where I needed to be, or not where I needed to be, where I wanted to be, like growing and being in a senior role. But it took me some time to get into that corporate environment, and it took kind of steps to do that. So, I think people just need to understand that the path is not easy and sometimes it's not as
Mhm.
clear as it needs to be, right? Sometimes you're doing lateral moves, steps down, steps up, steps over before you get to where you want to get in the end. And you have to figure out what you want to motivate yourself. Is it because to me it was I needed to make money, so I did
Yeah.
the best I could to make that, and everything else kind of started to fall into place over time. For sure I had difficult times, but I've gotten to a place now where I have a lot of freedom in the role that I have. It's a senior role. I work a lot of hours, but if I needed time off or I needed to do something, I don't get questioned because I work hard. They know what I'm capable of, what I've provided to the organization, and my commitment to the organization. So over time, these things kind of grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really valuable insight as well, because I think there is that big barrier in a lot of people's minds of taking that step back, even if it's going to advance your career in the future. Knowing that you have to sometimes go backwards is scary. People don't
Yeah,
want to do that.
absolutely. Yeah,
So I think that's really, really important to know. That actually ties to another question I wanted to ask you,
yeah.
specifically regarding any setbacks or challenges in your career and what that taught you.
Yeah, lots of them. I, being where I am now, I've learned so many different things. And would I change things? Yeah, there might be a couple things that I've changed, but I've learned a lot through the journey that I've been through.
Mhm.
There was a time where I was working at a recruitment agency, and so after I left Future Shop that I mentioned before, I finally got into the corporate environment. Because of my sales background, I moved to this company, which was recruitment. So we would be recruiting people for companies, and it was a sales commission role. And because I did sales commission, you could see the link between them. And
Yeah.
not only that, the reason why was because um, it's because I knew somebody at the company as well too, right? And I'll talk a little bit about networking because I'm sure you probably have a question about, what's key, and networking is key,
Right. Yeah.
when you're getting a job, because I would say a lot of my jobs, either somebody was already at that company that referred me, or someone asked me about it, or someone asked me to apply, or just through a referral, or something like
Yeah.
that. So I got to this company, which was called Quantum. It was for that we recruited for technology professionals, and this was in probably the late '90s. So technology was huge at that point. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, because this would have been before you're born, but there was a huge thing called Y2K. And
Yep.
in the year 2000, everyone thought every computer was going to shut down. And
Right.
so there was a huge growth in the technology industry at that time. So we made a lot of money because everyone needed technology people. So it was easy to it was hard to find the people. It was easy to get companies to pay for someone because there was a lack of talent. So
Yeah.
but then shortly after that, in 2001, there was a dot-com bubble. And so what the dot-com bubble was, there were all these technology companies that were overvaluated that ended up not making or not being able to meet the goals or the revenues or whatever was set for them. So then there
Right.
was a huge so at that point, a lot of companies went out of business, and I actually lost my job. So I got laid off
Wow.
at that point. And what changed my thinking was that while I was at Quantum, I was looking for other jobs, but I would only accept a full-time role because I was in a full-time role and I thought I needed that to move forward. And when I
Hmm.
lost my job, I was open to anything and I actually accepted a contract role with
Okay.
CIBC. And that's where I started with CIBC. So
There you go.
started there for 6 to 8 months. They offered me a full-time role after that, and I've been there for 22 years ever since, right? So these things happen to you throughout your career, which you may see as good, but they're you have to see the silver lining, right?
Mm.
And for me, the silver lining was I finally got an opportunity to get into a big corporation, and I took the chance of a contract role because the problem for me was a contract role. As I said, I was young, I was married, I had a child. I needed benefits. I wanted to make sure I had a long term kind of view into my career, and a
Right.
contract role wasn't going to give that to me. But when I lost my job, that was an opportunity right there to take that, and it was great because I got to work for a big corporation. And because I was able to prove what I could do, they kept me on, and I've grown ever since I've been in there. So it's great.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I bet if you asked yourself during that moment, right when you got laid off, hey, did you know that this is going to lead to your future career and you're going to be a
No
senior
idea.
leader, right? You wouldn't have had that idea. And so in that moment, you're just thinking, oh, this sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's quite interesting. So, I mean, you've worked across talent, change, leadership development. Um, when organizations are going through major changes like this, like maybe, the dot-com bubble, what do good leaders do differently to keep people motivated and aligned?
Uh, y- I mean, leaders, I see leadership in a different way. Leadership is, you have to be different for everyone. You can't be the same thing to everybody because everybody's
Right.
different, right? There are lots of people that go through these personality assessments and, they tell you what you are. And it's true because everyone is different. No one is the same. Now, everyone has some of the same grassroots and the same foundations, but we're all a little bit different, right? And
Yeah.
as a leader, you need to treat people different because different people need different things, right? Like I see people in three different ways, and then everyone has a percentage of those three different things, right? You know, there are three types of people to me in general. I'm sure there's lots more, but in general, if you were to kind of think about it, one is those competitive, kind of all out, ambitious, people that want to win in everything that they do. And
Right.
then you have those analytical people who are very principled and need to take things away and kind of think things through. And then you have those people who are people oriented and they want harmony, with everything. And to
Hmm.
me, those are the
Hmm.
kind of the three types of people. And then everybody has a percentage of that. Someone
Yeah.
might be 90% competitive and 10% or whatever, 5% analytical, 5% people person, or someone might be 60% people person with. So there's a combination of those three things. And as a leader, you need to see those things in those people. Someone who is very principled and very analytical, they like to take things away. They like to think things through. They like structure in it. So as a leader, if you're going through a change, how do you put structure in the change, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that they understand what the future is. They see a path, they see a plan in terms of next steps. If you're dealing with someone who's more of a people oriented person, right, who wants harmony, they're thinking about their peers, they're thinking about collaboration, they're thinking about, how are we going to lose people? Am I going to be the one to lose? So you need to talk to them about, what the future might hold around, you know, um, the type of work that's there, how they're going to work with others, how they're going to collaborate with others. And then the ambitious ones, it's about making sure that they have a goal that they need to achieve, right? So you set that goal and they'll strive to that goal. Typically, that's what they're driven to do. So, in change, you want to make sure that and even not in change, you want to be working with people and motivating them in the way that they need to be motivated. So I don't see leadership as telling them one thing. I see it as doing different things for different people when it's needed. So
I like that. That's really good. I think it's so difficult because a lot of the times, so let me use a bit of an example to explain what I'm thinking here. The other day I was talking to one of my professors and they had told me, imagine you are the owner of a company and let's say landscaping, for example, and you had someone, person A was the best grass cutter you had in the company. Well, you had a management position available. Would you provide it to person A or would you let person A continue in their current position because they're so good at their current position? I think it's difficult because when students look at leadership, they may only think, okay, well, I go off, I get my HR degree, I work hard as a whatever position that may be, and then I'm going to get into the senior role. I think it's so much more than that. You have to be able to deal with people. You have to be able to do more than just what you thought might be this position. So for you right now, how different is it than when you first thought of what this career could look like? Because you joined in, you said it was a contract, right?
yeah, so I started as a contract as a recruiter, and
Yeah.
really my job was to staff roles. I'd interview people, I'd recommend those people to leaders, then I'd work with leaders on the offer and closing the offer and making sure that you know they started. So that was kind of my role. Moving into leadership, I mean, did someone see the leadership in me? Well, obviously, I moved into a management role in that group, and then I kind of moved into the role that I'm in today. But um, you know, it's being in HR in the role that I am in today. That's what I coach leaders on is who's
Okay.
next and what do they need to do. And there are some people that are amazing at what they do, but they're not right for leadership, right?
Right.
We've promoted lots of people I've seen in organizations that are amazing at what they do. They are strong and they are knowledgeable, but they're not good at leading people. Some of the things that we see is they still want to do the job, right? Like the job they did. So you talked about the grass cutting thing. The person
Yeah.
who is excellent at the grass cutting, if they don't really have any people skills or the ability to lead and think holistically about the business, then the business is going to die. Why? Because they just want to cut grass and they're very good at cutting
Yeah.
grass. But what if there's a team of 5 people on the grass cutting team and the other 4 aren't really doing their job? Can that good grass cutter have a tough conversation with those other people? Can they make the tough decision to let somebody go if they're actually not doing their job? Can they coach them to actually teach them how to do the job?
Yeah.
If they're not doing well, and how do they progress them? And if you're becoming a manager, it's not just about the grass cutting. Now it's about, well, who should cut the grasses? How do you grow the business? How do you get more sales? How do you do that? And that grass cutter might not know how to do that and
Right.
may or may not have the capability. So it's tough because people will promote their top performers all the time, not thinking about those other things. And that's part of what I would bring as an HR business partner is when they're thinking about that, I'll ask them those questions to make sure that they're making the right decisions. Because sometimes not the top performer is the best person to move into a leadership role.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that almost it makes me think because leadership is now, I would say, it's one of the buzzwords you hear everywhere in the business field. You hear leadership this, leadership that. Well, is leadership something you can really grow, or is it something you're just born with?
No, you can grow it.
Yeah.
Leadership is not so, and I think people need to think about how leadership is defined because when companies say they're looking for leaders, we're not looking for leaders who manage people, right?
Mm,
That's not, and a lot of people think, well, if I'm a leader, I need to manage people. And that's not being, well, I mean, that is part of being a leader. But when
hmm.
I think of what we think about as a leader, that's not necessarily a leader. A leader is anyone who's in their role, whether you're entry level, you just step in and it's your first job and you actually don't know anything. Leadership is leading initiatives and thinking. So if you go to a meeting and people are talking at a meeting, being a leader is speaking up about what you think is the right thing and then taking accountability for that right thing and maybe even taking it away and actually doing it either on your own
Wow.
or other
Wow.
people might help you. So leadership is a mentality and a thinking. People think leadership is leading people, and it's not. And it is, yes, that is part of
Mhm.
leadership. You will lead people, but being a leader means it's like owning your own business and wanting to grow your business and taking accountability for your business. People see that as leadership, so they'll pick you out of a crowd if you're in a meeting. And believe me, when I moved to the bank, because I came from these small companies, there's so much bureaucracy, and it's not just bank governments, they all have it. The reason being is you can't make a decision on your own because there's so many other people affected by a decision that you make. It's such a big company. You can't make a decision because it may cause risk to another group. So you got to involve the
Yeah.
other group, and there's all these things. And so, there's lots of people that will just sit and talk and say, oh, we should do this and blah, 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 and then nothing happens, right? You just talk. But the people who are
Yeah.
leaders, you talk about it, and then they take away and say, "Oh, I called Sam and I asked him about this, and I think we could do this, and I think we could change this process." Okay, it's a great idea. That's leadership, right? When people talk about leadership, that's the mentality that they want, whether you're an entry level person or you're an actual manager of people.
Well, I love that because I think so many times, especially from a student perspective, looking at it, leadership is only a title you're given. It's not a characteristic and it's not a skill that can be built upon. So that's a really valuable insight. You had mentioned, Greg, you were doing talent acquisition when you first started at CIBC. There's a lot of students now that I feel like they have everything right on their resume. It's like, oh well, I have good grades, I have this, I have that. But what makes students stand out?
That's a difficult thing, right? What typically stands out is your network. And what I mean by that is,
Mm,
is if someone else refers you, not that you get put to the top of the list, or you could get put to the top of the list, but if you could get referred, but if I know the person who's referring, then to me that could mean a lot more than someone else that's just referred, right?
right.
So referrals definitely help. So if anyone out there is looking for a job and you know someone in a company or someone can refer you to someone else, those always help.
Yeah.
How a resume stands out is you shouldn't necessarily just have one resume. You need to tailor your resume to the job, and just a little kind of, maybe, I don't know if it's a secret or a little, guide when you think about that is look at the job description and try and find things that you have done that relate to the job description and put them in your resume, but use the same words that are in the job description in your resume.
Okay.
So, if you're doing analytics and you're, building a dashboard and you've had some skills doing that, use the language that you see in the job description in your resume because sometimes there's tools that pull from the job description to the resume and they're using keywords to do a pull to show resumes that are quick matches. So
Right.
those are some of the things. The other thing in a resume, a cover page can mean a lot, but also action words in your resume. And what I mean by action words is whatever skill set or whatever responsibilities you're putting under each job, what kind of actions or goals have you taken? And so an example is, what have you accomplished? What have you achieved? You mentioned if you're just trimming hedges and grass cutting, did you help with the sales of the business? Did you do door to door? Did you grow the business by 10%? It just shows, you weren't just there to just do the job. You actually took an
Mm,
initiative within the
yeah.
company, had interest in the company or interest in your role to make it better. Everyone's
Yeah.
looking for somebody to make it better. And believe me, we have hundreds of resumes when we have a posting that goes up. And to try and differentiate between resumes is difficult, right? And some of those action words to show that somebody actually is trying to make things better helps because if you had a company, you'd want to hire someone that would be interested in taking an initiative to try and help move things forward and make them better.
Oh, absolutely. So if I could kind of summarize that, the key takeaways from that would be tailoring your resume per job, specifically with job descriptions, and also having value added experience, what you added to the company while you were there. I think that's really beneficial.
Yeah, and I would just say again, I wouldn't. Again, you need to make sure that you've what you've done in your experience. I would just pick out the responsibilities in the job description that relate to that. So
Mhm.
again, you're just taking what you actually have experience with, but using more of their words, the company words versus your own words, type of thing.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to students in this position? Because I can speak from my personal experience. I'm looking for summer employment, but I'm coming from Ottawa, where we have two strong universities with
Yep.
thousands of students who are looking and seeing the exact same jobs, applying to the exact same jobs. And there's moments where it's like, oh wow, I've applied to over 100 jobs, and I have had to tailor my resume and cover letter to each one for maybe an AI to just say, nah, they don't have management skills, so we're going to ignore them. That could be really discouraging.
It is, and it's tough, right? I mean, it's I don't want to say it's easy. Life is really tough, and people
Yeah.
and people think it's going to be easy, but you got to overcome it. Like I'm not, I would say that if you have to do it 100 times, if you really want the job, you got to do it 100 times. I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm an old school thinker. There's a lot of people, that today would be like, well, only do it, only apply to 20 jobs then and tailor your resume. No, I mean, you got to take every opportunity that you can. And I'm not trying to say you have to tailor your resume for every single role. Your resume might be fine for some, but if you think
Yeah.
it's not a match when you look at because you'll see the actual job description, that you can take some of the wording that's there and try and use that wording in your resume as long as it relates to something that you've done, right? To make sure that you've got that experience. So,
Yeah. 100%. So, Greg, if you were a student today and you may be in a similar position, third year or entering your fourth year of university, about to graduate, what would you do differently?
I mean, I think I would have tried to get into because I wanted to be in the corporate world. I would have tried to get into the corporate world earlier. I would
Hmm.
have tried to I would have tried to build a network. I'm an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. So for me, building a network is difficult, and especially when I was young. For me now, it's easy to build a network. Why?
Yeah.
Because I have tons of experience. I have a role that people, see as something that they want, either mentorship or questions or things like that. So
Totally.
I don't have to go to them. I'm having a lot of people come to me, but again, I've been working for 40 years. So obviously, or whatever, 35 years, it's taken time to actually get there. And when I was young,
Yeah.
I didn't have any network, right? And I didn't have anyone to really rely on. So I took what I could get. But, I would try and build that network. And when I say build a network, it's not just reaching out to people to talk to people and say, oh well, now Sam's part of my network. Sam and I had a discussion. It's a
Right.
network is really Sam and I are connected, and I might only talk to you a couple times a year or maybe even once a year. Like to me, that's still a network, but I help you and you help me, right?
Yeah.
It's not about, well, you're in my network and I'm always just going to ask you and all the other people about jobs. It's when I speak to you, I'm telling you, hey, I'm looking for a job. And you might say, hey, I'm looking for somebody. Like, let's just say you're, a senior manager at a company. And you might say, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any entry level roles. I need someone with 5 or 6 years experience and, in this. And you might say, hey, I got a cousin or I got a friend or my dad knows a friend who's, looking, or my mom or something. And you're giving value to them because you're saying, I'm going to reach out to someone to see if they're interested. And you might send them a resume. They don't forget that. And then now it's not like you owe them one and they owe you one, because people do things
Hmm.
without doing that. But the more that you help people, they're going to help you, and that network will work for you. So you can't just reach out and say, well, I reached out to somebody and that's it. It's how did you add value to their conversation? Because they're going to add value to your conversation. So you always
Yeah.
need to think about how you add value. So, in that case where you've got tons of students applying for roles, the resume and the cover letters are going to help a little bit, looking at, how the resume relates to the job, but then utilizing that network, speaking to people, going there, doing research on companies, whatever it might be to kind of get there. You got to differentiate yourself. And you might not get there the first time, but you got to keep trying. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's valuable, especially the keep trying part,
yeah.
because, like I said, students are getting discouraged. It's a reality out there.
Yep.
Um, that could be hard in some sense because as a student, I'm going into a conversation and I enter a networking event. What do I have to add?
I mean, you should always think that you have something to add to a conversation, right? Like
Okay.
whenever you come into a room, but you need to be prepared for that. You should, I mean,
Yeah.
some people just naturally can walk into a room and, they've got this gift to gab and, be able to talk to people and do what they need.
Totally.
That's not me. I said I'm an introvert. So for me, events and even speaking, like I've spoken in front of hundreds of people, I've done presentations, and I get nervous every time, but it's all about prep work. It's all about thinking about what you need. It's like when you go in for an interview, you need to have an elevator speech, right? Or an elevator pitch, which you need to have 5 minutes. Why do you think the company should hire you? What are you bringing to the table, right? Think about that and shorten that to 30 seconds when you're, at an event. And because you want to make an impression. One of the things impressions mean a lot. And it's not that you're walking up to the first person you meet and boom, you're into your elevator pitch and you want to sell them in 30 seconds. It's you need to figure out how to, have a conversation with somebody and then gradually let them know about what you bring to the table. And it needs to be fluid, right? And that's not going to happen the first time you do it. So the more events you do and a 10, the better you're going to get at it. And you'll see people, because you might go up and talk to a manager and someone else might come beside you and you see how good they are and fluent or
Mhm.
the choppy. So you need to take every experience as a learning experience. And that was the thing for me that really helped me get to where I am today, is I've learned good and bad things over those things. And I still make mistakes, but I've done a lot of great things with the things that I've learned as well too. So take those opportunities when you're at those events and just, try to do your best. Think about how you're going to approach somebody, have that conversation, let them know what you can bring to the table in a nice way without it not being kind of a sales conversation like you're selling yourself, but you do have to sell yourself, right? But there's a
Yeah.
way to do it where you could fluently kind of do that and attend as many as you can, because it's, to me, practice helps. Like I can't present in front of hundreds of people without presenting in front of 5 or 10 and kind of
Yep.
building my ability to kind of get there. So to me, it's all about practice and just taking the opportunity. You can't worry about failing. Everybody fails. Everyone has to start over. So, you have to, and, I get people get discouraged. It's tough, but it's been tough for everyone before them as well too, right? And don't get me wrong, there are lots of people that had it easy, and I see that all the time, right? Again, it's 15 to 20% of the population might get it easy. Why? They already had a connection. Their mother, their father,
Yep.
their uncle, or somebody else had a connection at the company that they want to work at. So someone put in a good word, and someone likes their father or their mother, so they ended up hiring that person. And I'm not trying to say that's why they got the job, but they got in. And what I mean by got in is they got an opportunity to present themselves, because
Yeah.
getting in is the hardest part, right? Getting that first interview, getting that contact. And once you get the contact, well, now they're down to 10 people or 5 people that they're choosing for the role. And now you have an opportunity to sell yourself. And if you've got the best, you know, um, skill set, then ultimately, hopefully, that you'll be the one that's hired. So, those referrals don't get you the job. Those referrals get you in so that you can present yourself to get the job, and then it's up to you at that point. And again, you might not get it the first time or the second time, but you got to prep, and you just got to learn from all your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to go back to one thing you mentioned there, impressions, they're huge. You could have someone who may be the best data analyst in the room, but if they're talking and not to say being shy is wrong, but if they're very closed in and they can't explain what's on their mind, then nobody's going to gain that from them, right? Nobody's going to
Yeah.
look at them and think, well, you are the best data analyst. So I think that can honestly be more important sometimes, is that impression over sometimes what you really do bring to the table. Not to decredit bringing actual skills to the table. That's obviously important.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's quite insightful. Someone wise once told me that it's who you know that get you in the door, but it's what you bring that keeps you
Yeah. Yeah.
there. Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. So we've talked a lot about your career, how you got into your current position. We spoke a little bit about what students can do, how they can differentiate themselves, what to expect. Um, Working at CIBC, that's such a different landscape, I would feel. How do you think CIBC handles students, and what's something that CIBC does really well?
Well, we have a huge student program. We have a recruitment team that's just dedicated to students and campus, and
Oh,
it's a pretty big team. So we hire, I don't even know, maybe 800 students every summer. We hire them in the fall and the winter, and so we have a huge student program. And students are a big filler for our entry level roles as well too, as we kind of continue to grow our organization. What do we do well? Well, we have a dedicated team. We have a huge orientation when students start. So their first day that they come, we tell them about the culture, we talk about CIBC, we get them all set up with their technology. So, we kind of bring them all together. And then not only that, the students get to interact with one another, because it's hard for a student when they first start, because it's a big company, you don't know who to go
hmm
to. So having buddies, or, like a peer or something like that, they get to build that kind of network. And I think that's what
yeah,
CIBC does really well. I mean, for our general students, and what I mean by general is, we have a different program for our capital markets business. So I support the capital markets business. And the capital markets, we actually train them for 1 month before they even step into their role. So we
wow,
bring them on board, they get a bunch of training, they get a bunch of views versus the rest. Um, Sorry, when I say a month, those are for our new hires. But for our students, they do get a week's training before they actually start, versus the students in the rest of the enterprise outside of capital markets. They probably have a day or two of kind of training before they kind of step into their role. So I think we do a great job of introducing students, getting them onboarded, introducing to our culture, giving them, some of the development and training that they need. And then the great thing about a large organization like CIBC is there are so many things that you can do just online. Like we have access to training, online training. We have access to people, to provide some of that training. You have access for peer networks or mentors. And we had a lot of students reaching out to, some of the leaders and some of the people just to do exactly what I'm doing today. Give them an overview and kind of help them with some perspective. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So CIBC is really room to grow then.
Yeah. I mean, we are growing. We've been growing for the last little while. I think we're over 50,000 employees now, and
Wow.
we've done great. In the market, all the financial institutions are doing well. I mean, other than maybe the last couple of weeks, but given everything that's happening, so.
Yeah. You said you said Market Capitals. Is that what you mentioned?
Capital Markets is the group.
Capital Markets. I switched it around. So
Yeah,
what is that to our audience who doesn't even know what that might be?
So capital markets is the business that deals with our corporate clients. So the big
Okay.
companies, whether you're an Apple, Microsoft, big mining company, TELUS, Rogers, whatever it might be. And there's really three main businesses there. One is our trading business. So, doing all the trades where they trade commodities, they trade stocks, equities, rates, all those different types of things. And then we have our investment banking group and our corporate banking group. So those are the three big businesses that I generally support within CIBC.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Greg, it's already been 44 minutes of this podcast so far. It's crazy how fast the time goes. I don't want to keep you all here all day, although it's incredibly engaging and interesting to hear your perspective. On the podcast, we always finish up with a heavy hitter question. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this.
Right. I'm ready.
Scare you a little bit.
Sure.
If you could put a billboard across the world with one sentence on it that you knew would start to change the minds of those that read it, what would it say?
Off the top of my head, put yourself in the other person's shoes before you speak.
I like it. Perfect. That's great. That's great. So have a bit more empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I just think you have to understand where people are coming from. Everyone perceives things a different way. Everyone thinks in a different way. If you try to think about how others are seeing things, you will approach them differently. I'm a big believer in what comes around goes around, right? If you're nice to people, people will be nice to you. If you're tough on people, then people, probably won't help you out when you need it. So.
Totally. And that can help students entering their careers as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and having this conversation. And to our listeners out there, thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. You can listen more on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and other social medias. Thank you very much.